communities. Plus, Florida has other cities that have urban search and rescue teams. So those will be the first teams on the ground, augmented by the remaining 26 federal urban search and rescue teams that may be deployed if required.
David, you've seen a lot of storms in your work here for the state. What worries you as you look at this storm?
Well, I think Craig hit the nail on the head. We worry about it coming up through the state, unable to get resources back behind it. But I used to have a diabolical boss. His name was Craig Fugate, and he had us plan for a hurricane called Oh No. And that is almost following this particular path.
Just planning for the worst possible.
Just planning for the worst, getting the team ready, getting the locals, involving them with the planning process, the Herbert Hoover Dike, all of this. So this is not something that has not been gone unplanned for in the past. We have a plan to go into the Keys exactly as Administrator Long is doing right now, and that is getting aircraft carriers and or other large ships that have aircraft such as helicopters, heavy lift, that could bring resources in.
And we're going to talk to Administrator Long. I talked to him earlier today. We're going to play that a little bit later on in the broadcast. David, just in terms of getting people to leave, the folks who decide to stay, who say they can ride it out, we hear obviously from first responders that can be a drain on resources. That they think they're just doing it for themselves, but it can actually have a ripple effect on first responders needing to spend time trying to rescue them. How much of a problem is that for emergency personnel?
Well, it ends up being a large problem because, as we talked in the earlier segment, what happens if communications goes down? Now I've got someone who's trapped or injured that we didn't even know who was staying, who's needing help. How do they even get that notice out? People have got to think beyond just, well, I want to ride the storm out. What happens when the first responders come into a dangerous area to have to bring you out? That is taking resources from other folks that perhaps didn't ride the storm out, perhaps needing 911 right now.
Craig, for FEMA, how difficult is it just getting accurate information? I mean, obviously you get information through all the different cities, through the local and the state actors, but just trying to organize things immediately after and even during the storm, how tough is that?
Well, it's never easy, and that's why in supporting Governor Scott and the Florida team, Brock's already doing this. We learned this after Katrina. We can't wait for formal requests to come in. Brock's had his teams in the state EOC, so they're already synced up working with the state EOC. They have teams ready to go. And something that Dave and I and a lot of us figured out a long time ago, we can't wait for assessments. We have to roll as quickly as the winds permit and start moving to the area of heavy impact. And we respond based upon the projected impacts. If we wait for the facts to come up, it's too late. So this is something we've learned in Florida. It's something FEMA does. We're not going to wait. The skies won't be clear. We'll roll as soon as we can get people on the road and it's safe enough to go. But we're going to respond to the area of impact like it's bad, and hopefully it won't be as bad when we get there. But we cannot wait for those formal requests or assessments to come up, and we have to roll as one team.
Craig Fugate, I appreciate your time, and David Halstead as well. Good to talk to you. Up next, an update from the ground in Barbuda. That island is devastated. CNN had one of the few crews on the ground there today to get a sense of the...
Patrick Ottman is in Cuba for us right now, where this storm is really developing. Patrick, be careful over there, but tell us what you can.
Just as the last time we talked, Wolf, the first major squall has come in, rain blowing sideways. We can no longer see the islands off the coast. It is really blowing here. I think it's just the beginning of this very powerful storm, Category 5, coming to this section of Cuba, and I think it's just the beginning of a very long night.
When we spoke just a little while ago, Patrick, it seemed relatively calm, pretty sunny, almost like a normal day, and all of a sudden this has developed. So what are they saying in Cuba right now? How much time do you have before the real hurricane develops? Because this is just the outer circle of it.
Yes, these are just the outer bands. We're not supposed to get the worst of it till probably till early tomorrow morning. But all day long, they've been telling people here in the coastal areas of Cuba, this part of Cuba, that it could flood, that the wind is going to come like this, that it's going to be very strong, and that people need to to evacuate, and then there will come a time where they will no longer be able to evacuate. That time has now come. You can't drive in this, you can't walk in this kind of weather, and it's just going to continue to deteriorate. So for people in Florida who are still on the fence, these are the beginning of the conditions that they will face. This is not the full force of the storm by any measure, because remember, the storm is passing by Cuba. It's not going to hit Cuba the way it's going to hit Florida, and I have to say, you know, it can almost knock you over. I'm leaning into the wind now, and a half an hour ago, there was almost clear skies, and we've seen this come in, it's blowing the trees. I can no longer see the water out there, and it's a very much changed situation, and it happened within the space of just a few minutes, Wolf.
Yeah, just a few minutes. Stand by, Patrick. Louis Uccellini, the director of the National Weather Service, is looking at the images that we're showing. When you see this going, this is just the beginning for the Cuban people.
That's correct. It's just the beginning, and they're on the south side of the storm. So it'll be the north side of the storm and then the east side of the storm as it makes the turn. That's actually going to be the worst part of the storm. So they're being brushed by the storm, and they're on the south side, not the worst part, and you see what's happening already.
Patrick, very quickly, there are millions of people over there potentially in harm's way in Cuba. Are they prepared for this? Have they evacuated? Are they in shelters?
So the Cuban government says that hundreds of thousands of people across this very long line have already evacuated. Tens of thousands of tourists were taken off the islands behind me, from the hotels there, the beaches, and taken to other parts of the island or to airports where they could fly home early to cut their vacations short. Other Cubans have gone to stay with relatives, have actually gone up into caves in the mountains. So everybody who was going to evacuate probably at this point has done so. Other people here in this town where I am have said that they are going to ride it out, that they've moved their furniture up to higher levels. They know there will be heavy flooding here, and this is a dangerous storm. But for many people, they just want to be in their homes to try to protect their belongings. Of course, this is a very poor country, so when a storm comes to Cuba, like the way the storm is coming, it can have a devastating impact, Wolf.
Do we know, Patrick, and I'm not going to bother you too much longer because I know the situation is getting awful over there, what the condition is at the U.S. Naval Base at Guantanamo Bay, Gitmo? The U.S. has a significant number of troops there and clearly some prisoners as well.
Absolutely, and they were hunkering down this morning because they are a little bit further to the south. Probably the worst of the storm is going to miss them. I'm on the north central coast, so we're getting a lot more of the storm. Of course, the Cuban government has said that every bit of the coastline, the northern coastline at least, was going to be affected. The whole length, they said, up till Havana, perhaps was going to get some sort of weather. U.S. diplomats, for the first time since I've lived
the
here
island's
6
already
years
hit by
ago,
Hurricane Irma, are beginning to look toward rebuilding, but many, of course, are starting from almost nothing. And there's the other hurricane, Jose, to worry about. In a moment, we'll get an update from Barbuda. But first, let's check in with the Bahamas, where many evacuees from the smaller islands have ended up. CNN's Cyril Vanier is in Nassau. He joins us now. What are conditions like there, Cyril?
Waiting for the storms, the winds have really begun to pick up here, but we are waiting for the worst of it. Now, I'm actually going to be one of the more encouraging, probably, reports that you're going to get this evening, which is that the forecasts here in the Bahamas have been proved slightly wrong, but in a good way. The winds we're going to get here are not going to end up being the hurricane force winds that we feared even 24 hours ago. We're talking tropical storm force winds. And I just spoke to the person who's looking at this, tracking this hour by hour. We're not expecting here in the capital, Nassau, anything that would really threaten the structure of buildings. So what we're looking at, there's still a possibility of floods. There's still a possibility of rainfall. Also, although we haven't seen much of that yet, it's going to happen throughout the night. So people are doing one of two things right now. Either they're regrouping in whoever has the strongest home, the safest place to be, or they are going, for some of them, we're talking a few hundred, maybe a few thousand people, in one of the 24 or so shelters that are dotted across the capital now. And the CNN team went there today. Those people, for the moment, pretty grateful towards the government that they've organized this. They're just wondering what kind of, what damage, if any, they're going to find to their home when they end up going back there.
Yeah, well, good news there for the Bahamas. Cyril Vanier, I appreciate that. Now I want to go to Barbuda, where obviously the news has not been good. An estimated 95% of buildings were damaged, according to the Prime Minister. Now it's another under another hurricane watch for Category 4 Hurricane Jose. Leila Santiago is one of the few journalists to get onto the island today. She joins me now from nearby Antigua. Leila, what was it like?
You know, Anderson, we were there as people were evacuating with the few bags of belongings they had left. There was a lot of anxiety, a lot of people overwhelmed by what the future may hold. One man saying he was reminded that nature is truly powerful. And when you ask them, what would you say to people in Florida? They told us, get out. You do not want to be in Irma's path. Once a Caribbean getaway surrounded by turquoise water, now demolished, left desolate, unrecognizable by Hurricane Irma. This is the shocking view as we fly onto the island of Barbuda. Jerome Teague says hurricanes are a way of life here, but not this one.
This is the worst one I've ever seen.
And this could get worse as the hurricane-ravaged island braces for Hurricane Jose. Those who braved Irma now arriving in Antigua, evacuated to escape a second major hit. Elvis Burton is determined to protect the place he's called home for 12 years, at least what's left of it. He evacuated but returned to find a home no longer livable, savaged by nature.
It's my home. I have to try and save it.
Even more are determined to save lives, get people out of Barbuda, save the people who seem to have lost it all. It's hard to imagine that an island now rubble, an island home to nearly 2,000 residents, could get any worse than it already is. But the Prime Minister has said 95% of the buildings are damaged, and it will be quite the rebuilding effort. More than $100 million to get this the way it once was. Barbuda looks like a war zone.
Like a war zone. Everything is blowing out.
This is the wrath of Irma, now on the move. Irma has shown her strength, the reason so many fear what is headed to Florida.
Leila, you talked about seeing people being evacuated. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention quickly, you know, the government here asking people in Antigua to help. One of the nice comments I heard from someone today, someone is saying we are sister nations and the only thing that separates us is water. So, you know, there's a lot of anxiety among the people of Barbuda, but it is sort of nice to see people coming together on this island to help out the nearly 2,000 residents right now.
Yeah, well, we certainly wish them the best. They're going to need a lot in the weeks and months ahead. Leila Santiago, thanks. Coming up, more breaking news coverage of Hurricane Irma from here in Miami Beach and all across Florida. The very latest that we know.
They didn't have to evacuate, but the State Department said that if diplomats wanted to leave from the embassy in Havana, they could do so, and many people took them up on that offer. Of course, this storm is going to continue to go along Cuba tonight and tomorrow, and then go up into Florida. So it just shows you how quickly the conditions can deteriorate, well, can become quite a scary situation.
Patrick Ottman, one of our courageous journalists. We have journalists all over the path of Hurricane Irma right now. Thanks very much. Be careful over there. We'll stay in close touch, get some shelter. This is only going to get worse for you, for the people of Cuba, over the coming hours. We're going to take a quick break. Resume.
We've had a lot of changes with the update that came out at the top of the hour, so let's break it down for you. Forward speed is now west at 12 miles per hour. That has actually slowed a little bit in the last advisory. Wind gusts have actually increased, now up to 190 miles per hour. And we actually expect even more intensification once it gets just a little bit further north over the coast of Cuba. When it does, it's likely going to be, again, in some of the warmest water in this region. That's what hurricanes like to be, and they like would do. That's how far inland it could end up bringing some of that storm surge. So you're talking numerous streets that would be underwater, as well as, Wolf, you have to understand, when you're talking 10 feet, that's an entire first story of a building. So for a lot of these homes that are there that aren't high rises per se, you could have a lot of people that are dealing with the same thing they dealt with in Houston, where the entire first story of their home is underwater, and they may have to seek refuge, say, on the roof of their home. Just like we saw in Texas, we may end up seeing a similar scenario for the folks in southern Florida.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that part of Miami you're showing. All those streets, a lot of high-rise buildings, condominiums, office buildings, a lot of streets you're pointing out would clearly be flooded, right?
Yes, absolutely. And again, we're not just talking a foot or two. Many of these would be 6 to 10 feet of storm surge that would come in. That's not passable for most vehicles. So at that point, you have to stay put. You can't go out on the roads when that storm surge would be that high.
And it is still a Category 4 storm as of the 8 p.m. update. The next update will come in at 11 p.m. tonight when they update the track and also update the maximum wind. Still moving due west at 12 miles per hour. We have not had any northerly shift yet. And you can see that with our satellite motion. You can see that eye of the storm moving due west right now. Part of the eye will actually nearing the coast of Cuba as we speak. And we are expecting the track for this still to turn to the northwest, although, again, we're going to update the track for you at 11 p.m. Saturday, still near the northern coast of Cuba, and then more of a turn to the north, possibly passing over the Keys as a very powerful and dangerous Category 5 storm, then up near the Naples area, potentially making landfall again as a Category 4 storm, and then making its way north, probably through places like Polk, Highlands County, parts of Hardee, DeSoto County, so kind of through the central western portions of the state. It will continue to weaken at this time, but by the time it passes through parts of our area, we're talking about a Category 2 or 3 storm. As it moves out of Florida, it's weakened into a tropical storm and then will continue its way off to.
We've had a lot of changes with the update that came out at the top of the hour, so let's break it down.
Where a lot of folks have already evacuated and others are hunkered down waiting for Hurricane Irma as it approaches. A message tonight that could be life-saving. It comes from Florida's governor, and it's as simple as life or death. He says if you have been ordered to evacuate, leave now, not tonight, not in an hour, now. The storm is now expected to grow back to Category 5 force as it slams into the Florida Keys. In terms of evacuations, though, law enforcement is saying the window for that is closing, and at some point tonight, very shortly, it is going to be too late, and you just need to hunker down and do what you can. I want to go to, and we're actually getting now, we've been getting the winds for the last hour or so, but this is the first of some of the rain bands that we have just started to get. We may lose actually our signal, but we'll just keep on going as long as we can. I want to go to Patrick Ottman, who's standing by in Cuba. Patrick, what's the situation there?
Well, along the northern coast here in Cuba, we've been feeling these rain bands as well. Squalls coming in. It has been knocking out the power here for the last several hours. We only have lights up because we have a jet along these coastal areas. I was speaking to someone who's in the next town over, and they are feeling the conditions much more because they are to the east of us. They say they're getting absolutely.
Explain what that was like and how close together are those bands now?
You know, you can't really space them out. You have this dead calm. It just stopped raining since we started talking. It was coming down pretty hard before, and it stopped like someone turned off the faucet, and yet it will begin again and become more and more frequent. You know, this morning when we first started reporting from here, I had my rain jacket on, and it was a hot, sunny day, and it just didn't make sense to have it. And until that band came in, we hadn't had a drop of rain, and then all of a sudden, just unleashed this incredibly strong, pelting rain, almost blinding. I couldn't look at it. The sky became black, and it just didn't seem to stop. I've covered a number of hurricanes, but never had it start up so violently where you just had a gust of wind and this rain absolutely coming at you. So it can speak to the power and perhaps the unpredictability of this storm. We haven't had one come through in a little while, but you can certainly sense that more and more of this storm is going to be coming ashore here in Cuba. And for people who have very old houses in bad condition, you know, that kind of wind, that kind of rain can bring a house down. So the Cuban government has also been encouraging people to evacuate, to go to the shelters they've set up, and hundreds of thousands of people have taken them up at that offer to get out of this area and get to safety, Anderson.
All right, we're going to continue to check in with you throughout the night. Stay safe. I want to check in with Allison Chinchar, who's at the CNN Weather Center. Allison, obviously the most important questions: where's the storm now? How strong is it? And how strong is it going to be when it makes landfall, and where?
Right, so right now it is a very strong Category 4 storm. Winds 155 miles per hour. That's only 2 miles per hour short of a Category 5. And we expect it to intensify back up to that strength in the coming hours. Right now it's currently located between the Bahamas and Cuba, but it's over that really warm water. And that's what's going to be one of the ingredients that's going to help fuel this storm to intensify. We expect it to be a Category 5 as it crosses over the Florida Keys, and likely a Category 4 as it makes its way over the main peninsula of Florida, but then weaken relatively quickly. Because of that, we have the hurricane warnings out on the south portion, talking Fort Pierce, Sarasota south, and then we have hurricane watches for places like Orlando and Tampa. But these are likely going to spread north, Anderson, in the coming hours as we get closer to landfall and they have a more defined track for some of the northern counties.
You know, so many people, of course, here remember Hurricane Andrew and the devastation of that. Could you give us a sense of the scale of this storm compared to Hurricane Andrew?
Right, so the big glaringly obvious thing is size. Take a look. This is actually to scale. This is Andrew. This is Irma. You can notice right off the bat that they are way different in terms of size, but also winds. So at landfall, Hurricane Andrew was 165 miles per hour. Irma is expected to be around 150 for the main peninsula, slightly higher than that as it goes over the Florida Keys. But the time is the big concern. Andrew only spent 4 hours over Florida. Irma is expected to spend 30 hours over Florida. And you have to keep in mind when you're talking about that in terms of these speeds, that makes a huge difference. At the ground, Anderson, we're talking maybe 145 miles per hour. But when you talk about all the high rises, the condos, the hotels that are there, if you talk about a 30-story building, now those winds actually increase as you go up. So now we're looking at wind damage that would be around the 175 mile per hour range. You go up even higher to say an 80-story building. Now you're looking at the winds to be nearing 190 miles per hour. So that's going to be a concern, Anderson, because we have so many high rises across Florida, especially South Florida.
Yeah. Allison Chinchar, we're going to check in with you throughout this hour as the winds continue to pick up here. But again, they're just a fraction of what is to come. This area, we're on Miami Beach. We're very close to the ocean right now. Probably by tomorrow night, even before the storm makes landfall, we will not be able to be broadcasting from this location, Miami Beach. We'll probably be a little further inland. I want to go now to the fire chief in Naples, Florida, Pete DeMaria, in Naples, Florida, for just the latest on the situation there and what they are expecting. Chief, appreciate your time tonight. What is your biggest concern at this hour for the folks in Naples?
Well, our biggest concern right now is storm surge. We're very concerned about the water coming up throughout the city of Naples, and it causes a major hazard to our community.
What sort of storm surge are you expecting? What kind of storm surge have you seen in the past also?
We actually had a 5-hour rain about 3 weeks ago that caused us about a 1.5 foot storm surge. We had vehicles all over the streets in Naples. We had some difficulty there. But now we're anticipating a possible 6 to 10 foot storm surge in some areas. We've evacuated or asked for a mandatory evacuation for all residents that are west of US 41.
And in terms of those who have not evacuated, because obviously in a mandatory evacuation, not everybody heeds those warnings as they should, are you able to respond in the height of the storm to 911 calls? Or I assume, like many first responders, you just have to wait it out until the storm dies down?
Yeah, that's our policy as well. We'll respond as long as it's safe for our first responders to get out there on the street and do the work they do. We'll normally shut down about 45, 50 miles an hour of sustained wind, and then pick back up when the winds start to die after the storm passes.
Do you have a sense of how many people have heeded the evacuation warnings?
Well, I think Naples right now is pretty vacant. A lot of people have left the area, and we do know that there are some residents still here, but we're encouraging anyone that is in an evacuation area or has stayed and fears for their safety to get out of the city of Naples and off the coast and get to some of the local shelters that the community is providing.
Chief DeMaria, I know you're going to have a lot of busy days ahead and probably weeks ahead. I appreciate all you're doing. Thank you. Stay safe. We'll check in with you. Earlier, I talked to the Miami Beach mayor, Mayor Levine. Let's take a look at that conversation. The winds are just now starting to kind of getting the first taste of this. What's your message to those who have not evacuated, who are here now?
We have another 2 or 3 hours, and then the buses stop and the trolleys stop, Anderson. At that point, we're telling people, bunker down where you are.
It's too late after that.
After that, absolutely. I think so, because the winds are picking up. You can feel what's going on, and we want now to them to be safe where they are, but they got another couple hours to go. We hope that they go to these evacuation centers, that they leave Miami Beach. As you know, it's a low-lying barrier island. It's not safe for a hurricane of this magnitude.
For the people who are staying, I mean, it seems pretty calm. I was at the public supermarket, which I think is open until 9 o'clock tonight. They had plenty of food. I filled up a shopping cart. There were people, I mean, they seem to be ready for this, or at least very much aware of it.
I think so, Anderson. We've been preparing for about 5 or 6 days now. I mean, literally putting in portable generators, portable pumps, sandbags to all our residents, locking down construction projects so there's no debris flying around. We've been communicating so aggressively with our entire residents and visitors so that they hear our message, what to do, what not to do, and hopefully evacuate.
So for you, is it storm surge? Is that the biggest concern initially?
I think it's a combination of wind and storm surge. As you know, Miami Beach is no stranger to flooding, so we know something about flooding, and we understand how devastating it can be. When you have a hurricane, especially a hurricane of that magnitude, there's not much you can do.
Right. And in terms of wind, I mean, a lot of the building codes were changed, so newer buildings, they are supposed to be able to sustain, I think, 150-mile-an-hour winds.
Absolutely. No question about it. The newer buildings that were built after Hurricane Andrew have much higher protocols, those construction codes. They will be able to withstand. And, of course, a lot of the Art Deco buildings you see behind us on Ocean Drive were built in the 1920s, and they've been here for many, many years. They've withstood a lot. But there are many structures that won't. Who knows? How do we know? Why take the chance? That's what I tell people. Rather be safe than sorry.
In terms of recovery after the storm passes, you know, whether it's late Sunday, Monday, and people start to come out again, do you have a sense of gas stations, how quickly they may be able to get up and running? Because I know a lot of gas stations now by law have to have a generator.
Sure. Well, let me tell you what we're doing. I'll be bunkering down at Mount Sinai, one of our big hospitals on Miami Beach. I'll be with a central command staff that'll be there. It'll be a skeletal staff. And then we're going to keep our first responders, the majority of them, across the bridge on the mainland. They're going to come over after the storm ends. They're going to be able to begin clearing the roads, because you have to have the roads clear. We can't do anything unless the roads are clear. We can't even have the residents come back.
So that's the first thing you want to focus on?
That's the first thing we're going to do. And then from there, based on the assessment, we'll move forward and court goes step 2 and step 3.
So bottom line tonight, for anybody listening who's in this area, what's your message?
My message is, at this point, you got another couple of hours to take one of our buses and our trolleys, go across to the mainland. We have multiple shelters. If you have pets, we have shelters that'll accept pets. We've already gone out to our seniors, our special need people. I was walking around talking to homeless people and convincing them to get on our buses and go, and a lot of them did. By 10, 11 o'clock at night, my suggestion is bunker down where you are and stay safe.
Mr. Mayor, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just want to repeat that. The mayor saying by 10 or 11 o'clock, by 10 o'clock, which is the end of this broadcast, if you're in this area, just hunker down and stay safe, or 11 o'clock. We'll check on preparations just north of here in Fort Lauderdale coming up. And later, we also want to take you back to the Keys. Could be the first place to feel a Cat 5 hurricane in this country. We'll show you the danger there and what people are doing about it. So a new forecast just came in with Irma. Explain where it is, how strong it is, and where it's heading.
Right. So right now it is currently in between the Bahamas and in Cuba. That's not a good thing. It's in very warm water, and that's going to allow the storm to intensify over the coming hours, likely back up to Category 5 strength. We are just now starting to see some of the extreme outer stretches of the storm begin to produce showers and thunderstorms over the Florida Keys. That activity is likely going to increase in the coming hours. But again, the storm still a very strong Category 4, just 2 miles per hour off from Category 5 strength. But we do expect it to get to Category 5 strength just as it crosses over the Florida Keys. For the main peninsula of Florida, likely to be a Category 4 and then weaken relatively quickly as it moves to the north. We have seen expansion of the counties that are under hurricane watches and hurricane warnings, and that, Anderson, is likely to continue to push off to the north in the coming hours as landfall gets closer and closer. At this point, landfall looks to be in the Florida Keys right around early Sunday morning.
And storm surge, obviously a big factor here. What should residents here expect?
Right. So starting from, say, about West Palm Beach, stretching down through Key West, we're talking 5 to 10 feet. On the southwestern side, say Naples down to Key West, we're talking 8 to 12 feet of surge. It's going to be slightly higher on the southwest side because that dip from where the beach goes and dives into the ocean is much shallower on the southwest side than it is on the eastern side. But to understand what this means for a lot of folks around you, keep in mind a single-story building is about 10 feet. So if we really end up getting storm surge of 5 to 10 feet, that means likely the entire first story of this home could be submerged in water, Anderson. And we saw so much of that in Houston because of Harvey. And we could end up seeing a very similar scenario play out for folks in South Florida.
Allison, do you have a sense of where, that northeast quadrant of the storm is going to be hitting in Florida? Is it too soon to tell?
Again, and all things can change, but likely it looks like it would
Florida Keys.
And I know, or my understanding is that when we're talking about the Florida Keys, that you had said it is not clear that it is a survival. Situation for anyone who chooses to stay in the Florida Keys.
Hey, we're joining you live tonight from Miami Beach. About 36 hours from now, where I'm standing very close to the ocean, Miami Beach, won't be able to stand. It won't look anything like this. And just a few hours after that, it very well could be underwater because of the storm surge. The same is true just north of here in Fort Lauderdale. That's where CNN's Alex Marquardt is. First of all, how are the residents there prepping for the storm? How seriously are they taking it?
Well, Anderson, I got to tell you, I've been surprised at the number of people we've seen out here today. A surprising number of people are going to be trying to ride out this storm. We've seen a lot of people out here on the beach today. That is the beach, the water line right out there beyond those palm trees. Now, this is a mandatory evacuation zone, and they will eventually be imposing a curfew at some point tomorrow. The people who we have spoken with who are staying, they tell us they are not in that evacuation zone. They say that their structures are strong. Their homes can withstand these winds. They have hurricane shutters. They boarded up their homes and have the supplies to last this storm. But the major concern here, like down there in Miami, is the storm surge. We spoke with the mayor of Fort Lauderdale earlier this afternoon. He said that is his number one concern. Take a listen.
When you look at this storm,
if you end up pushing all that water that came across the Atlantic with this storm, and you push it up on our shores, and you combine that, if we're unlucky to be at a high tide, especially during the seasonal high tide season, and then combine that with a little rain that's going to be there anyway, that precipitation, then the last element, the east wind pushing that water on the surface, those factors could all lead to a serious water issue here in the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Now, the mayor was confident. Besides that, he says that all the preparations have been made, that they've gotten all the information and resources they need from the state and federal government. He told us it is not the storm that he is particularly afraid of, but the aftermath. Anderson?
I understand there's still a few bars and businesses open in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, it's fewer and fewer by the hour, certainly more inland away from the water. This entire stretch along Beach Boulevard has been boarded up for most of the day, all except one very famous bar called Elbow Room, which is just a block away. They were packed all day long with what the mayor said was people trying to get a few more cold ones in. They have just closed up shop before the storm hits. We expect any activity out here in the streets to grind to a halt tomorrow as people take shelter. Anderson.
All right, Alex, thanks. Stay safe. Given what happened in the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan after the tsunami, there are some reassuring words tonight on Florida's coastal nuclear plants. The Energy Department tonight saying it is confident about preparations at the Turkey Point and the St. Lucie reactors, both of which survived Hurricane Andrew, we should point out. For more now on federal preparations, let's go to Renee Marsh at FEMA headquarters in Washington. Renee, I mean, with Irma following so closely behind Hurricane Harvey, is FEMA prepared for this in terms of manpower and funding? They got to be stretched thin.
You know, I just got briefed by FEMA leadership here and asked that very question. And they say that they're ready. But, you know, the truth of the matter is with a massive storm like this, every need will not be met in the immediate aftermath of this storm. All of that being said, again, they say that they're ready and they're pre-positioned. We are locked down to this specific location because this is an active operation that you're seeing behind me. But I do want to kind of give you a feel of the way things are working here. This is a 24/7 operation here. You are looking at essentially the nucleus, the brain of the entire federal response. It's being coordinated in this room. The people here are working 12-hour shifts. They're working 7 days on, 7 days off, and tonight their primary focus is Hurricane Irma. Again, it's safe to say that this is the brain of the federal response operation. Now, we have some roughly 200 people in this room. I mean, people from various agencies, whether it's EPA, it's the Department of Energy, they're all here coordinating this response effort. They're trying to determine where should the resources be sent? What sort of resources do they need to send? And tonight we do know that they are buying things like extra tarps in preparation for this storm, but they tell me, Anderson, the most frantic moments inside of this room is the moments before the storm as well as the moments after the storm.
They do have a 75%.
Those two nuclear power plants that we talked about, do you know about precautions being taken to protect them?
We do know that in this room, they are monitoring that very closely. You mentioned at the top there the Fukushima disaster, so they obviously don't want a replay of that. All of that being said, we do know that the two nuclear plants in Florida, they're taking the precautions by shutting them down. We also know that they have been built to really withstand really strong winds as well as storm surge. We know that it sits about 20 feet above sea level. So all of those precautions are in place. All that said, though, you have members from the Department of Energy in this room, and they are watching. That is one of the many things that they will be monitoring when this storm blows through. Again, really what you're seeing behind me, a lot of people, when you consider on a normal day when there is no storm threat, when there is no bad weather, there are about 5 people in this room. So tonight we're talking about more than 200 people crammed into this room watching this storm as it inches closer and closer to Florida, Anderson.
Renee Marsh, appreciate that. Thanks very much. New storm information now from the National Hurricane Center. That's coming up next as our 360 coverage from Florida continues.
Right. And
This
the
is
keys
CNN.
have maximum elevations on the order of 5 or 10 feet, a few a little bit higher. We're talking about a 5 to 10 foot storm surge. That's the rise of the water above ground level. And on top of that, we're talking about significant waves, 15, 20 feet high above that. And those waves are going to be extremely destructive to any buildings they encounter. And at this point, anybody who is not left, I encourage to get out as soon as possible.
So you're basically saying you could have 25 to 30 feet of water above the ground in the Florida Keys in some places.
That's correct. If you add the waves on top, that's possible. And even without the waves, though, 5 to 10 feet will cover most of the islands there.
And in terms of the actual strike itself, Ed, obviously, I know a little bit shift here, a little bit shift there could make a huge difference. It could make a massive difference, right? Right now, I know the models are all converging, right? The storm is coming straight into Florida, heading up to Miami. If there is a move 15, 20 miles to the east or west, how big of a difference will that make?
It will be of extreme importance in the end. The problem is we don't know whether that will occur and which way it will occur. So everybody here has to prepare South Florida for the possibility of Category 4 conditions. If the storm shifts off a little bit one way, well, maybe we'll get Category 1 or Category 2 and feel lucky about that. But there's still the risk of Category 3 and 4 on both coasts of the southern Florida Peninsula.
All right, Ed, I appreciate your time and thank you.
Meteorologist Craig Setzer with our CBS station in Miami. WFOR is tracking Irma. Craig?
Jeff, here's the latest this evening. The latest advisory at 5 o'clock showing winds still at 155 miles an hour. Now, the Category 4 here is a little deceiving because the speed only has to increase by 5 miles an hour to make it Category 5 again. So it's right on the edge of Category 5. Here's the wind field. That red area there, that's the hurricane force winds, and inside of that is the core, the worst part of the hurricane, the eye wall. That's the most destructive part. Now, the forecast track shows the storm battering the Cuban coast through the night tonight, through the day tomorrow, and then it comes to a key turn right there, starting to move north toward the Florida Keys. The latest advisory is calling for strengthening Category 5 going into the Keys sometime during the early morning hours on Sunday, and then after that it's to the north. This is the Sunday 2 p.m. time frame. Closest approach to South Florida and Miami. Any shift to the east could bring that destructive core right into the metropolitan areas. Then the rest of the state's still under the gun. It's up into the Tampa area where there's increasing concern for storm surge there. Orlando, the wind threat, and finally it begins to wind down. And Jeff, the Keys have not been hit by a Category 5 hurricane since 1935, and that was catastrophic. Category 5 hurricanes are very, very rare.
Craig Setzer from WFOR, thank you.
Go right to our Chief Meteorologist, Steve Jervey, in the Forecast Center. He has the latest on where Hurricane Irma is expected to go and specifically what impact it might have on us. Steve.
Absolutely, Keith. Yes, it has shifted to the west, and we've been talking about that can change. It will change. I say it every time we look at the track. And that has been the trend for the models, and that's why we've seen it shift farther back to the west toward the Bay Area. It just means different things for us. We just have to prepare for different things, including some pretty strong wind gusts as well as some coastal effects, especially later Sunday into Monday. So let's take a look at the watch that you mentioned. That means within 48 hours, you could see hurricane force wind gusts, which would be 74 miles per hour in the highlighted area there, and then a hurricane warning in place. Basically, that means 36 hours for some of the southern counties, so that's the difference there. But it just
We're
means
live in
prepare for
Miami
high
Beach.
wind.
Until today, people living along Florida's Gulf Coast were expecting Irma to mainly be an East Coast event, East Coast of Florida. Now they could be seeing the worst of it this weekend. Drew Griffin is in Naples, which could see 12 feet of storm surge. Drew, how are preparations there?
You know, they're just about done here in downtown Old Naples. This is Fifth Avenue. Friday night here. I don't know if you've ever been here, Anderson. It should be packed. It is just boarded up. Very few people here. I think the people on the west coast of Florida, especially down here in southwest Florida, took a look at that last jog or the last couple of jogs from the prediction centers and decided this is just not worth it, this size of the storm. We just got an update, 9 o'clock tonight, from Collier County, that's the county we're in, to show you how seriously the people here are taking it. 9 shelters in Collier County are now at capacity. They're not taking any more people. They've opened up 3 more this evening as the influx of people away from the shoreline continues to move. And we've talked to people all day long, Anderson, who are hopscotching. So they know somebody who lives a little bit inland and upcountry, know somebody who lives a little bit north of here. They're leaving there, what they thought was a safe location, and going there trying to ride out the storm. It looks like everybody seems to be taking this very seriously. There's no party atmosphere. I'm not running into a lot of the heroic people who think they're going to ride this out with a bottle of booze. They are taking Irma incredibly serious, and I know that has emergency officials here very pleased that they have done about as well as they could do. And Anderson, they have just one more day now, daylight hours tomorrow, when you're going to have to make your plan, and then that's it. You're just going to have to hunker down. Anderson?
Yeah, I mean, if they're talking about a potential 12-foot surge of water, could that bring flood water to where you are in downtown?
You know, it certainly could. It's all about the elevation. And in the lower part of Florida here, you measure that in very, very few feet. We're about anywhere from 3 to 5 to 6, 7 feet above sea level here in Old Naples. A storm surge of 12 certainly could be in here. A storm surge of 6 at the right time of the tide, maybe not. But you have all these inlets and waterways and bays all over Florida where that storm surge really could be magnified by the push of water in a very narrow area. So you have those various places to worry about. The storm surge is what they really got people's attention here. You may be able to think you can ride out the winds, but that storm surge is a totally different animal, and it also leaves a lot of misery and a lot of days lost in its wake because the emergency crews just can't get back in here fast enough and the power can't get on fast enough. So they're trying to manage both the storm and the aftermath of the storm. And the combination, Anderson, they're saying we might as well just get out.
Are there gas shortages there?
I can't tell you if there's gas shortages. There's gas stations that are not open. I think there's probably gas in the pumps, but the gas stations have wrapped up their pumps. Some of them have wrapped them up in saran wrap. Others have just tied their hoses around, and they've left because the workers have to get out. We did find one gas station open. It did have gas. There was a medium-long line, but it took us a long time just to find that gas station that was open. We're expecting fewer and fewer and fewer places just to be open, whether they have gas or not. So mobility is going to be an issue tomorrow. I think that's why a lot of people who are still here probably won't evacuate, because they are unclear that they have a shot of gas all the way up the chain to where they think they would need to go. Anderson?
But just to reiterate, there are more shelters open now, so that if people decide last minute, even tonight, they could get to a shelter.
Yeah, that's right. 3 more shelters open in Collier County. There are shelters open in Lee County. You can find shelters.
All right, Drew Griffin, I appreciate it. Thanks. Let's get the latest now from Ed Rappaport at the National Hurricane Center. Just take a look, Ed. Just let us know where this thing is, what it's looking like. What do the models show?
Yeah, at this point, the center is located just off the north coast of Cuba, about 300 miles off the coast of the southeast Florida Peninsula and the Florida Keys. The forecast continues to be for the center to go to the west and then turn towards the north near the Florida Peninsula, crossing first the Florida Keys. And we had, as we were starting there, some video of storm surge, what we possibly could see in the Keys and elsewhere. This large area in red is the area that's susceptible to inundation, and that's where we have a hurricane warning and a storm surge warning in effect, which means that there is a high risk of life-threatening storm surge. We're talking about 6 to 12 feet in this area and 5 to 10 down in the Florida Keys and in the southeastern coast of the U.S.
You know, Ed, a friend of mine in New Orleans was just reminding me, you know, you talk about a 10-foot storm surge, but there's wave action on top of that, correct? I mean, I saw some modeling saying, you know, waves could be extraordinarily high. Is that accurate?
Yes, and that's the secondary concern, is that the water level will rise to potentially the top of some of the keys. And then on top of that, though, we're going to have waves that could be 15 feet or so. There are waves that have been measured already with this hurricane offshore that are nearer to 50 feet. Those will not be as high, of course, once they get towards to the land. But with that inundation of 5 to 10 feet and waves on top, we're very concerned. And I know there still are some people in the Keys, and this is the time to get out. The track has shifted in such a way that the Florida Keys are the most vulnerable now from Hurricane Irma.
And as far as timing, when can we expect hurricane-force winds in the Miami area?
At this point, we're forecasting, it's a little hard to see here, but here's the Florida Peninsula and the Florida Keys. What we're talking about is the center of the hurricane going to be making landfall perhaps in the early hours on Sunday, but it'll be preceded by tropical storm force winds beginning Saturday night on the peninsula, and then, or by mid-afternoon on the peninsula, and then hurricane force winds sometime after dark. Again, if the center should shift farther to the west, that's good news for the southeastern part of the state, but bad news for the southwestern part of the state. We'll be right at the edge of hurricane force winds if the center continues to move up the southwestern part of the state.
And just in terms of the speed with which this storm is moving, for people in, say, the Miami area or in the coastal areas of Florida, how long are they going to be in, you know, in heavy winds for?
In the area that gets the center of the hurricane crossing over, so you have the largest extent of tropical storm and hurricane force winds, the longest time. We're talking about potentially 24 to even 36 hours of tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds that could be as long as 10 hours. So that's going to occur right where the center makes landfall.
Wow. Ed Rappaport, good information. I appreciate it. While hundreds of thousands of people are heeding evacuation orders, others are choosing not to or simply can't. We'll talk to a man who's stuck in Key West about how he'll try to survive the storm next.
Gus, and we know about that from previous storms dealing in the Bay Area. If you're new to Florida, this is all probably new information to you, but the old saying, run from water, hide from wind, is pretty good advice. 155-mile-per-hour winds is Irma, a very strong Category 4 hurricane, interacting with land a good portion
to say, you know, what you saw with Harvey is definitely happening here in Florida for a variety of reasons. One of my neighbors, their son has cerebral palsy. For a variety of reasons, people have chosen to stay behind, and we've really come together. Same thing at work. I mean, I work with such an amazing group of dedicated people. Same thing. Like, we all came together like a family. We're all checking with each other here at the condo. The building management has been excellent. So I feel not alone, and I'm definitely not physically alone.
Well, Vanessa, your compassion to care for your clients, even in the face of this monster storm, is incredibly admirable. I wish you the best. We'll continue to check in with you just throughout the next couple of days. Aaron Huntsman is on potentially even more dangerous ground. He is in Key West, sheltering at a friend's house with his husband, their dogs. Joins us now on the phone. Aaron, so this storm now, we understand, is going to hit the Keys as a Cat 5. There is the mandatory evacuation. You decided to stay. What was the thinking on staying, and how concerned are you?
Well, we had reservations St. Petersburg at a hotel, and yesterday Governor Rick Scott announced that there was a mandatory evacuation for the area where we were going, so the hotel canceled our reservation. So we kind of were stuck here, but our attorney, Bernadette Restivo, that helped us overturn Florida's ban on same-sex marriage, gave us her place since she went up to Orlando. We're at the highest part of the building, 18 feet. We got our dogs out. All of our furniture is over the 7-foot mark for a surge, and we are now safe on Solaris Hill, right by the cemetery. And we're scared.
How close to the ocean are you? How close to the water are you?
We're right in the center of the island. It's never flooded at this point. Even the hurricanes for over hundreds of years, they've been keeping track. I mean, it's been close, but our other place is at 3-foot elevation, and we are at 18 feet here.
And understandable that you're scared. I think a lot of people are right now. Do you have a small boat or anything if at some point it is flooded and you need to get out?
Well, I don't think the water is going to be around much. I think the main thing is that you have to hide from the wind and run from the surge, or vice versa. So we do have mattresses here in the house in case, it gets bad, like Andrew, if any walls come down, so we're protected. We could have been stuck up on the freeway, could have had an issue, but, on solid ground, coral, old Key West rock, this is what Key West is about. And any other people that are having, that are scared, we're opening our place. Bernadette Restivo has said, please come here. We'll shelter you during the storm.
And I understand your husband, who works at the hospital there, is actually on standby to help reopen the hospital after the storm hits. Is that right?
Yes, he's a medical supply, and he's part of the team that is going to help reopen if there's any surge damage. So, we can't open up to the rest of the public, get the locals back here until the hospital's going, the bridges are checked, and roads are clear. So,
yeah. Well, Aaron, we wish you and your husband and your pet the best. We'll continue to check in with you. Stay safe. Be careful. Coming up, a storm the size of Irma can absolutely shred boats, no matter how big they are. So Florida boaters are trying to save their boats from being destroyed. We'll have details on those preparations next.
Patrick is in Cuba for us right now, where this storm is really developing. Patrick, be careful over there, but tell us what you can.
Just as the last time we talked, Wolf, First major squall has come in, rain blowing sideways. We can no longer see the islands off the coast.
Oh, it just came in. Max winds of 155 miles per hour, still moving off to the west at about 12 miles per hour. So it has not made any sort of northerly component yet to the track. You can see the eye right now nearing the northern coast of Cuba. The minimum pressure 924 millibars. And as we zoom in, you can still see a very well-defined eye. Now, the National Hurricane Center in the last of these said they weren't expecting a whole lot of weakening with the system as it interacted with Cuba. Have to wait and see over the course of the next several hours if we do see any of that, as it does continue to move west as we head into Saturday. Notice more of a northwesterly turn and still a strong category 4. It's expected to be as we do head into Saturday and Sunday there. And we'll try to see if our computer system wants to work with us. It's thinking right now. But what we can tell you is the track is very similar. So they're really seeing a lot of the effects of the storm right now, the heavy rain. The stronger winds from this system, of course, hurricane warnings posted up along the northern coast of Cuba and through the Keys as well, because we are expecting this storm to potentially reach Category 5 strength as it moves into the Keys late Saturday night into early Sunday morning, and then move up towards the Naples area, probably as a Category 4 storm, and then continue to trek north. The eye would be somewhere around Polk County, Highlands County. It looks like at this point, but that all depends on the turn toward the north. So you do still have to look at the whole cone. Although you do know it's narrowing at this point as we get closer to the actual event. Note by Monday at 2 p.m. The storm is moving out of Florida already, and it's weakened to a tropical storm. So probably when it's around the Tampa Bay area, we're talking about a Category 2 or maybe even still a Category 3 if it holds on to some of those winds at this point. Hurricane warnings have been posted for the southern half of our viewing area, where you'll see the effects first. Still a hurricane watch, though, for places like Pinellas, Hillsborough, Polk, all the way up through Citrus County. As far as storm surge is concerned, storm surge warning in effect for the Sarasota coastline. Storm surge watch in effect for parts of Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Manatee County. So here's a look at the spaghetti models. You can see most of them are generally in agreement right now on moving near the Naples area as we head into Sunday morning and then continuing up kind of the center of the state, maybe even a little bit farther west. Unfortunately, The trend the last couple of days has been slowly off to the west, so we're really not expecting it to move back east. Although you do know these tracks change very quickly, and that's why you have to stay with us for the...
Go right to our Chief Meteorologist, Steve Jervey, in the Forecast Center. He has the latest on where Hurricane Irma is expected to go, and specifically what impact it might have on us. Steve.
Absolutely, Keith. Yes, it has shifted to the west, and we've been talking about that can change. It will change. I say it every time we look at the track.
That's maybe a few
and
family keepsakes.
There's
a lot they cannot take. Homes can be weatherproofed as much as possible, but boats, of course, are a different story. Randy Kay went to a marina today to see what's being done. She joins me now. I mean, how concerned are these boat owners?
The boat owners are pretty concerned, Anderson, because a lot of them have been through this before. They've lived through other hurricanes. They know what can happen to boats. They remember the scene from Wilma and Andrew when these boats were sort of tossed around and piled on top of each other, and the marinas were destroyed. So we went to this marina in Miami today, and we saw firsthand what they're all doing to try and prevent